Good evening, everybody. Three.
Hello.
Good evening.
How is everybody?
We're good. How are you?
Doing great. I am just perfect tonight and excited to be here. So, as always, let's go ahead and introduce our panel. And up first, right underneath me, you got Daniel Velez, who is co-founder and CEO of A Safe Harbor Home. Oh, I think you're muted, Daniel.
Now we got it.
There you
There
go.
you are.
Good night to everyone. Hope you're doing good.
Right to me, you've got Lily Gonzalez, who is not only Daniel's wife, but also co-founder and program director for A Safe Harbor.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Hey, Lily. And underneath Lily, got Heather Williams, who is the community education coordinator and board member for A Safe Harbor Home.
Hello, everybody.
And I am Valerie Arrington. I am a former case manager, a current volunteer, and a board member for A Safe Harbor Home. So we want to welcome everybody to the table tonight. And we wanted to go ahead and make sure, because we are going to be discussing physical violence tonight, to include a trigger warning as always with this, because some information will be triggering. If you do feel triggered, have someone to talk to. And if you don't, if you'll look down below, you are going to see the numbers for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, as well as the Lifeline, as well as the National Domestic Violence Hotline, all scrolling at the bottom of your screen. So we're going to say, as always, welcome to our table. And let's get started. And I think I am going to start this actually with a story that we did get some permission to share this week. And I'm just going to call it Sherry's story. And pardon me, I will not be looking at the camera because I do have to read this. And I will show a picture here in just a minute, but I'm going to read the story first. It says, "Look at my face. Please don't look away. The makeup is layered to hide my bruises, but if you look closely, you still see the black eye, the pain, the shame, and the fear. Just wear your glasses," I hear my husband say as I leave for work. "Smile, Sherry," I tell myself, knowing that my smile can blind an audience. Glasses plus smile equals nobody will notice. But you do. I hear things like, "You look tired. Are you okay?" The voice inside my head isn't so kind. It's telling me people are talking about me, wondering why I just don't leave. The voice inside tells me if anyone finds out, he will kill me. The voice inside tells me I deserved it. The voice inside says I'll lose my kids, so I can't go to a shelter. The voice inside says I'll lose the house I bought on my own. The voice inside my head is shameful. The pain inside my soul burns. The flame that once burned brightly only flickers now and then. Nobody offers me a lifeline. Instead, they look away. The voice inside my head tells me the world will be better off without me and offers me a way out. The pain will end. The worry will cease. The power he has over me will vanish. I'm sorry. Hang on just a second. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't a better mother, daughter, sister, wife, or friend. My best just wasn't good enough. I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of the bruises. I'm tired of the pain. Now, her current situation. Yes, I have a black eye. I hate Facebook, y'all. I'm sorry. It keeps scrolling. Yes, I have a black eye. It's from a needle, not a fist. But as I layered my makeup on to hide the vanity bruise, I went back to a time when bruises never seemed to leave, back to a time when the only way out was to end my life. I did not succeed, thank God. I share this to help another, to let you know that I see you and the voice inside your head is a liar. Leaving can be scary, but there are so many ways to create a life without fear and violence. If you see someone with a black eye, please don't turn away. Be a source of comfort and compassion. You might just save a life. And here is Sherry. She is a trauma therapist now. So I happened to be scrolling Facebook, and she was one of my Facebook friends, and I reached out to her, and she absolutely wanted me to share her story. So thank you, Sherry. And it's
Valerie, this is something very important for the people to understand. The pain that this victim had gone through, and then the desperation, though they try to convince themselves that it is not that bad, it is really bad, and the pain is unsustainable. So it's something to pay close attention to.
right. This is also the reason I believe it's very important to make sure that we always have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, because she did mention, and we do know there's a correlation between domestic violence and increased mental health and suicidal ideation. So that's the reason we will always make sure that you have the two hotline numbers scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Heather, any thoughts on the story?
I'm just thankful that she's willing to let us share her story. But what she speaks about, most women or men deal with, how do you get out of that situation? Not wanting to speak, worrying about what would happen if you speak up. Your life could be in more danger if you're in a physically abusive relationship. And those worries of how will I make it? How can I make it? And then thinking, okay, if I just end my life, it would be better. But also knowing you're leaving your kids. If you have kids, you're leaving your kids in that situation. So it's really tough.
Yes, it is. So I'm going to say a real quick hello here to Rachel Gable, who did jump in here and say hello. So hello, Rachel. All right, I think we're going to move on. Y'all ready to move on to a PowerPoint and get statistics and definitions out there tonight?
Yeah, let's dive right into physical violence and what it is and what to look for.
Okay. Go ahead, Heather. Me and you'll alternate.
Okay. So abusive behavior can take many forms. It can include being violent or aggressive, making threats, controlling someone's behavior, putting them down, verbally abusing them, taking or keeping money from them, and putting pressure on someone to have sex or do things they don't feel comfortable doing.
Okay. And what is physical violence? Physical violence includes beating, burning, kicking, punching, biting, maiming, or killing, or the use of objects or weapons. Physical violence is an act of attempting to cause or resulting in pain and or physical injury.
So here's some statistics. Nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this adds up to more than 10 million women and men.
On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide.
Mm-hmm. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime.
Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries.
76% of intimate partner physical violence victims are female and 24% are male.
It happens both.
It does. There's just not as many statistics on men. And that's something we can talk about is why do you think that there are not many statistics on men? And
Right.
Well, one of the reasons that there's not much information about men is because men are mostly very proud to say something like that or admit something like that.
Right.
So they don't want to look like they're being controlled or abused.
Mhm.
So that accounts a big part. Why is it that there's not much information about men?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look at how society looks at that. Oh, you're a wimp. How'd you let someone beat up on you and all the things that, you let a woman do that to you? What's wrong with you? That kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Yeah.
But men can definitely be, and they
Hmm.
are victims every single day.
Yeah.
So 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men are severely injured by intimate partners in their lifetime. That says severely injured. These
Hmm.
are
A majority of physical abuse is committed by dating partners rather than spouses.
wow.
Hmm.
More than 75% of women aged 18 to 49 who were abused were previously abused by the same perpetrator. And we just want to say that the statistics provided in this presentation were found on the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, and their website is ncadv.org. So, all right, y'all, let's talk about the different forms of physical violence because, we gave a definition of it, but
Hmm.
there's a whole lot more than that definition.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you and I'll chime in, if I need to.
Yeah. Daniel, do you want to start? You want me to dive in? Where do you want to go?
You go ahead and you have a pretty good list
Mhm.
of the types of abuse. Let's go ahead and start with that.
Okay. So there are the obvious things: punching, kicking, shaking, suffocating, pinching, biting, scratching, tripping, choking, burning you, scalding you with something, forcing you to swallow something like a pill or a medicine that you don't want to take, cutting you, blocking a doorway or blocking a way out, not letting you leave, holding you down, holding your face, grabbing your face and forcing you to look at them or forcing you to kiss them, slamming fingers or toes in doors, stepping on your feet. And I don't mean like, oh, they stepped on my foot. This is, hey, you've stepped on my foot, or it's a control thing, it's an intimidation thing, it's a constant thing, not just, oh, you accidentally stepped on my foot. Um, Swinging you around, wrestling with you, holding you down and just playing. It's always just playing, pulling your hair, standing over you in a threatening way, um, driving like a maniac. When you get in an argument with somebody or you have a disagreement and they start driving like crazy, driving fast, that is physical violence. Um, Throwing something at you. They may not put their hands on you, but they may throw something at you, hit you with an object or throwing something at you, spitting on you, biting. Can you think of anything?
We have a range from a simple push, okay, with the intention of control and scaring the victim, but it could go way further than
Hmm.
that. How far can it go, Heather?
I mean, it can go all the way into killing you.
Exactly.
It can go escalate into killing you.
And that's what we want to get across to our listeners. The fact that it can be something simple, it,
Hmm.
it can escalate, and it typically escalates.
Yeah.
And one of the issues that happens in domestic violence is that sometimes some victims get away from a perpetrator, but then the next relationship, it's usually worse than the first one,
Hmm.
and it's hard for them to identify that they're going into a worse relationship, and that's something important to keep in mind.
Well, we need to also remember we just shared a statistic that said, what was it, 49% of people who were abused are abused again by the same perpetrator.
Yeah.
Oh, Amy Verito down here. I'm going to try to put it up here on the screen. She said breaking personal objects, blocking doorways and exits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Breaking your things, throwing them out in the yard, throwing clothes out in the yard, urinating on your stuff. Those are other examples.
The intention really is to scare the victim.
Hmm.
Because when you see somebody out of control and breaking stuff, you typically try to stay away from them. You fear that they might hurt you. And if that works for the perpetrator, that's what he's going to do. The problem is that after a while, it doesn't work. So he has to step it a little bit more. And that's when the pushing can come in, or the kicking can come in, or something a little bit worse than that. And it just continues the escalation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all have to remember physical violence is more noticeable. I mean, a lot of times because you carry the marks, you carry the bruises, but also, um, you've got the marks and stuff, but all of this is a form of control. Every single type of abuse that
Hmm.
we're going to talk about, the common denominator is control.
Yep. That's C word.
And it's sad. Daniel, do you have any more to add to Heather's list? Anybody in chat can also add.
Yeah.
Um, not anything that comes up to mind right now, but she gave a pretty lengthy list of these issues, and I know that it may be a little fast for some of our listeners or viewers, but right now what we're trying to do is get as much information out as possible, uh, just to create. Uh, um, just to create that idea on the victims and on the listeners or viewers that this is something that is very serious.
Yeah. And I normally always start each show, and I did not tonight, with it is our belief that through education and awareness will come prevention. And so
Hmm.
getting the information out there, we can always expand on it in future weeks. But getting the information on how to get help, that's our primary goals here. We don't want to see another person fall victim to domestic violence.
Well,
Absolutely. And I'd like to add to that no one deserves to be abused, and never the abuse is the victim's fault. So this is something that we want to stress throughout. It's never the fault of the victim, and no one deserves to be abused.
no.
The perpetrator will try to convince you it's your fault.
Hmm.
I mean, but Heather, do you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to say, while we're talking about physical abuse and talking about men and women being abused, um, it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to see, and when we talk about it, there's been a lot of social experiments done on how the society deals with women being abused by men and men being abused by women. And a lot of the social experiments, they have had staged a fight, staged whatever situation, um, to where a man is, grabbing this woman in public, screaming at her, grabbing her and shaking her and doing these things. And in these social experiments, of course, people are coming up to him and intervening and saying something. But when they flip the tables and they have a woman who is up in a guy's face, screaming at this guy, slapping him in the face, pushing him, shoving him, then there's people just standing around laughing, thinking it's funny, like, oh, what did he do to deserve it? And so it's kind of one of those things where even talking about it in teaching sometimes with the Katie Key project, some of the scenarios we talk about, they just kind of giggle about it. But why is that? Why? I mean, I know some reasons why, but why do we stop and ask ourselves, why do I think it's acceptable for a woman to hit a man or for a woman to physically abuse or assault a guy, but it's not okay for a guy to do that to a girl?
Yeah, it's kind of a cultural expectation
Yeah.
that a guy being bigger and stronger. He's going to really attack this person or physically attack her. Well, if it's a woman, and the height and the weight has nothing to do
Mm-mm.
with the ability to abuse somebody. You
No.
might see a short person yelling and pushing and abusing somebody that is bigger than them, and you say, well, how in the world is this happening? But the social expectations have a role to play in this.
I agree. And I like Amy's comment saying today's society, people turn a blind eye to men being abused because they don't see men as being able to be physically abused. And I agree with that also.
I do too. I do too, because men are generally supposed to be the big, strong, and
Mm-hmm.
like you all were saying, and I keep cutting out and I do apologize, but y'all are carrying on and that's awesome. But, you know, we've got to break down the barriers and the stigma that comes with
Mm-hmm.
domestic, and the walls that kind of say, okay, this is only a women's issue. It's
Right.
I
Mm-mm.
mean, it knows no boundaries.
No.
So moving on, y'all have anything else to add to the different forms of physical abuse?
Mm-mm.
Well, I want to thank Amy for giving us such good input.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and if anybody has any questions, whatever, please put them in the comment section. We will definitely try to get answers to your questions. We will try to answer them tonight. If we don't know the answers, we will find those answers out for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on to the next topic, let's talk about red flags to physical violence. There's warning signs, right? I mean, and let's talk about it first from if you're in that position where you're victim, what might you see going on?
Heather, you have anything to say about that?
Um, I mean, aside from the things that we have just listed, I mean, there are red flags. I just wanted to get to my list here.
Well, I'm going to start out, if it's okay, with
Yeah,
one:
go for it.
escalation of anger.
Mm-hmm.
That emotional, like you were talking about with the cars, and you were talking about with the driving. You know,
Yeah.
you can go from very cool, mellow to very heated, very quick.
Yeah.
And I think does that escalation of emotion and anger increase the risk that the next thing is going to become physical?
It can.
Well, you have the case of people who are just starting to date or starting to relate to each other, and the person one of them has a big problem or has a short temper, and they can flip, like we say, they can flip in a dime, and instead of being uh, that it's, the relationship is starting, and still that person can flip in a dime real quick. That's a red flag that you need to be aware, because it doesn't get any better than that. If
Mm-mm.
they have no limits, if they have no control at that point, it's not going to be any better in the future.
No, and a lot of times starting out, they're going to explain, "Oh, I just love you so much," and of course, that's not just starting out. That will continue. I love you so much, and it just bothers me, and just excuses. And that's kind of how they can explain it away. Is just because of love.
What is love bombing, Heather?
Oh my goodness. Um, Kind of idolizing you, showering you with so many gifts right off the bat, and just constantly giving you things, constantly showering you with attention, affection, and then wanting to get into a relationship instantly. They haven't known you very long and they want to be really serious really quick or move in with you really quickly, but just constantly buying and doing things for you
Do you
over
think
the
that
top.
you think that's a warning? I mean, is that a
Mhm.
warning sign?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I I'm I'm going to agree a certain percentage of it,
Right. And I'm
um,
glad you clearing that up.
because because there are individuals who can do that, and really it's just that's the way they are. They think they're not going to accomplish much if they don't hurry up because somebody
Mhm.
else could come into the picture. Um, but it's a warning sign for many. I would say for many relationships when that is happening, and one of the individuals wants to rush it,
Mhm.
you got to be careful.
Mhm.
Amy, she put up here overly love bombing, controlling, past reports, even hearsay of domestic violence from previous exes. That's a big,
Absolutely. Mhm. Because a lot of times you want to say, "Oh, it was just something a problem, the ex, it was their problem, it wasn't this person." This person would never do that. It was their ex. They were just crazy or they were just whatever. So yeah, that's
yeah,
a good.
And a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for what they do.
Oh no.
So we hear that very often in our program. It was not my fault. It's just that she lied. But the records indicate that she has some bruises and some marks on her. How did that happen? Oh, she inflicted them herself. And
Mhm.
after you've been working in this field for a little while, you know there are some bruises and some marks that people can inflict on themselves, but there are others that there's no way a person will inflict that kind of injury to themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you they go through the beginning of the relationship, and even after instances of domestic violence, you have the honeymoon phase, right? I mean,
Sometimes.
that's very common.
Mhm.
And we'll get into that later on down the road, but there are some very key things that we want to touch on, whether it
Yeah.
be in.
The truth is that when it comes to domestic violence, there is so much, and it can go into so many directions
Mhm.
that no matter how much we can talk and how much we can say and how much we can inform, there's still going to be something new or something that we don't cover. But our intention really is to make sure that we can prepare our viewers to see some signs and to see what they can do. Most of it, if they are being victimized, that they can learn how to protect themselves and do it in a safe way.
Mhm.
Right. All right, let's talk about red flags for an outsider looking in. Maybe you have a loved one that you're concerned about. What might they see that, you know, an early warning sign?
Well, some of it may be cuts.
Mhm.
Uh, you have a family relative or a friend or whatever, and you start seeing unusual cuts, and they try to explain them, but they kind of don't make sense. So cuts are some of those signs. Bruises.
Mhm.
Many times with bruises, what happened to you? Oh, I hit a door, and the bruise is not consistent with that. Black eyes can be a sign of so many things. And if just because you see a person with a black eye, it doesn't mean that they are being abused. But it could also mean that they are being abused. So you have to, if you're the one who's noticing some things, you don't jump immediately and say this is a result of abuse, because it could be a result of something else. But at the same time, if you notice other factors involved with that bruise, that he is quick tempered, that he's never happy, that he looks at her or she looks at him in funny ways, and then you see all these bruises and these black eyes, it's something to look after. Burns. Uh, One of the issues sometimes is cigarette burns. The perpetrator burns with a cigarette the victim just to control them. um, restraining or grip marks. When they try to restrain the victim by holding him by the arms or by the face, like Heather mentioned earlier, um, just 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 causing ju- just a strong hand holding a person and causing those grip marks. And we see that often too, when we sometimes do interviews with women, and sometimes they show us the bruises that they have on their arms, and you can see the hands uh, marked on both sides of the arms. So these things are things to look after. Heather.
Well, and we'll talk about some other stuff, but when you're talking about bruises, most of the time people are going to do their best to cover those up. So if somebody is allowing you to see a bruise that's covered up normally like on an arm or a wrist or something, that's an open door, maybe a cry for help, but they don't want to say anything because they're afraid to speak out. So we just really need to be watching for those things, and be willing to, I mean, even if it's, oh, you go in the bathroom at the same time they're in the bathroom because it's the only place they're alone, and just say, hey, are you okay? And I see that Amy has popped up and said, flinching at loud sounds. And Amy, that doesn't sound odd at all. Flinching at loud sounds, can be a sign of being yelled at constantly or being really edgy because, who knows what's going on. But flinching at physical touch, yeah. If someone goes to reach for someone and you see them pull back all the time, it can be a sign that they've been abused. And being regressed from family and friends. And I was going to say that too. If you notice somebody, because they may not have any bruises, they may have hidden bruises, or they may not have any bruises at all. They just may be dealing with somebody who, punches walls right next to them or throws things at them, but doesn't necessarily leave a mark. But if you notice that they're pulling away from their family and friends, or they're more isolated and all their time is spent with that person, and that's not necessarily saying that you can't spend a lot of time with your person, but just pulling away from the norm, like from their family and friends. um, making excuses or becoming really defensive when you start asking them questions and making excuses for their abuser or for what's happening. If getting really defensive about it, those are some signs also. um, just trying to
What
think
about
what else.
wearing long sleeves when it's hot outside? I
Could
mean,
be. Hmm.
or wearing long pants, or and it's not saying every time you see somebody in long sleeves. We're saying it could be. You put it together
Yeah.
with everything else. Is this a potential warning sign? You know,
Yeah.
trying. Um, I mean, there's a lot that you see, and I really do think that the isolation from your family and friends, if
Hmm.
you notice a change in somebody's behavior, no, it does not always mean they are in an abusive relationship, but it definitely is something to watch.
Well, and they may start cutting, which of course can be a hidden thing also that you may not see because that could be hidden under clothes. They may be cutting, they may be depressed, they may just be withdrawn. You're going to see possible behavior changes, as far as them being edgy or more hateful with you, or,
What
it's not always really obvious, but subtle changes in behavior.
Yeah. What about using substances, alcohol and drugs when they weren't
Mhm.
doing it before?
Yeah.
The medication, for the trauma, for the pain, for the bruises, the broken bones. We do have to be mindful that people who are in domestic violence situations often, not always, but
Yeah.
often have co-occurring mental health, substance abuse issues
Yeah.
because they're trying to deal with the trauma.
Yeah.
So,
Very true.
um,
And sometimes what happens is that not that the victim uses the drugs because that's what they choose how to cope with the situation. Sometimes they are forced to use
Hmm.
drugs. We've had a few cases that the perpetrator forces them to use the drugs, and it starts with something very simple. And sometimes they have no boundaries, they have no respect, and they start using heavy drugs from the first instance, putting that person at risk because they can overdose very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very, very important things to look at. And in addition to that, some perpetrators also know where to hit, where to punch, where to cause bruises, so they are not noticed.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have to say that some people that do work in law enforcement um, do that because they know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But not, I'm not saying that all cops do that or to put a bad name on the cops. But unfortunately, there are some cops that do that, and many have lost their jobs because
Yeah.
Oh, Daniel locked up this time.
He froze.
He'll be back.
they're back.
Here he comes.
You mentioned the police officers, and I know that you said it's not to give bad names, whatever. Our country, I really do believe, severely lacks training in how to deal with victims and these circumstances. So this is why trainings and information education is so important. So
Well, and that's system wide because I had a conversation with an attorney here in town over this last week about the courts and the judges. And family court judges are not required to have domestic violence training, and that's a problem because they're dealing with custody issues and they are dealing with this all of the time. And all they have to go off of, if they have not taken the training, is their own opinions, their own whatever. And so it's a problem,
And
but that's
sometimes,
another
sometimes
topic.
yeah, sometimes what happens too is that let's say people who are going to mediation, that person who is doing the mediation doesn't know the signs,
Yeah.
doesn't know what's going on. So because if they knew what's going on, at least in the report, they can let the court know that they have some concerns about some issues going on in the relationship. So
Hmm.
those are important factors. So this is such a multidisciplinary issue
Yeah.
because there's so many professionals that need to have some basic knowledge, and they are not trained. They're not
Hmm.
trained. They some of them go to college, and some of them take so many courses, but something like this, it's they're not trained very well or not trained at all. So
Hmm.
this is something that it's important for the public to know, because the more people get to know the signs and the types of abuse and what things to look at, uh, the better as a community we can work together to try to ameliorate. I know that there's people that talk about stopping physical abuse and domestic violence 100%. I don't believe that will ever happen. But
No.
if we have an educated community, at least there's going to be a better chance for these victims to survive and to live a safe life.
I agree. I agree. All right. So if we see what we see as physical violence for someone,
Hmm.
how can we help them? How can we help them? What can we do? What should we do? Not talking about being a victim. I'm talking about if we know someone or see someone,
Hmm.
how them.
Heather?
Be supportive. Don't ever say, "Why don't you just leave?" That is the last thing that a victim of domestic violence wants to hear is, "Why don't you just leave?" Because it is not that simple. Um, but be supportive. If you want to talk to them about what's going on, don't attack the person, but just tell them what you see. Go to the behaviors that you're seeing and noticing. Don't attack their significant other. Just say, I notice this is happening to you. It is not normal. I'm concerned with you. Very concerning things. You can't force them to leave. Do not go to the abuser and have a conversation with the abuser, her or him, because you may make things much worse with them, for them, if you go to the perpetrator. Don't trash them on social media. Don't get in the middle of that. But you can't force somebody to leave a situation. And no matter how concerned you are for them, no matter how much you want them to leave and how much danger you see, they have to make that decision at the end of the day. But your job is to be very supportive. Now, if you know they're in danger, then reporting, and I know Daniel will go into more on reporting and when you should report and when you should allow this person to make those decisions. You want to
Yeah,
talk on that, Dave?
the major issue here, and the best word to use is support.
Yes.
Because once the victim feels that they are supported, they know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tell them what to do or how to do it, or question why are they doing what they're doing, or letting other people do with them, they're going to shut the door and they're going to
Yeah.
put you aside, and then they're going to be completely alone. So it's important to understand that. You can tell them, I'm here for you. I notice that there's something going on. You don't have to tell me details. But if you want to talk, we can talk, and we can figure out what resources are available so we can deal with this problem in a safe way. Because support support and safety are very important things and very important matters in this. So once you let them feel supported, and then they start feeling safe about talking about it, and then they will start feeling safe about making decisions, because it takes time for them. We we recently had a case that the victim, uh, the the perpetrator went to jail, but and the victim was living on her own with her children, and so on. But when he got out of jail, she had no other choice, because she couldn't find a place she to stay long enough on her own with her children. She had to go back to him. And just imagine that she's your friend, and you tell her, "Oh, I don't like you anymore," or I can't believe what you did. You just went back with him. I can't, I can't believe you do these things. You deserve more than that. It looks like you like that type of behavior. Don't do that. Don't do
Mm-mm.
that. Still stay supportive and say, "Hey, listen, anytime you need to talk, let's talk. Just call me." And
Yeah.
then we will talk about this next thing, which is a safety plan, how to leave that situation. But we want to do it in a separate program, because we want to talk about safety, because that's important.
Yeah.
So the best to the question of excuse me, when is the best time to report? The first time.
Yeah.
The first time it happens, report it. Because if you don't do that, it's just going to continue escalating. Um,
Mhm.
and make sure that you do a clear report. Uh, the circumstances of what's going to happen after you report it, there's many directions that these cases can go, and we will try to bring different professionals working in the field to discuss these things, because sometimes we blame it on the court, sometimes we blame it on the cops, sometimes we blame it on lawyers. But sometimes, and many times, the courts are limited to what they can do based on the information that they have. The police may be limited, or an attorney may be limited. So
Mhm.
it's important that you just understand where you are as a victim, and for us as witnesses of that situation, that we know how to deal with it.
Yeah. And I
And
see.
some and scared, or maybe they're just used to that normal of what happens and find it as a safety net. And I think that's a really good point.
It is. And patterns, we go back to what is normal to us in our patterns. If we have patterns, if there's a pattern in our life, we're going to go back to it when there's a lot of uncertainty or, yeah, when you're
Even
scared or
Well,
situation be
if
somebody's
you're a victim and you don't have a job, you haven't worked for many years,
yeah,
and you have children, now you're on your own. How are you going to support your family? So
right.
probably there's a big chance, and it happens very often,
Hmm.
that the victim goes back to the perpetrator to prevent being homeless. Uh, they got nowhere to go. Sometimes they can go back with the family, but sometimes because the family doesn't know, they say, "Oh no, you're not staying here because you're going back with him or with her," and that doesn't help. So that's one of the reasons why we created a safe harbor home, because through a safe harbor home, now the victims who go to the emergency shelter, they can they can be helped to go to a place of their own. We help them financially with their rent, and they can take time to get a job, to get their life straightened up, because unfortunately, the emergency shelters don't keep them too long. So if they can't stay there for too long, once they leave the shelter, if they have no other resources, unfortunately, they're going to
They'll
go
go
back
back.
to the same situation. And who knows, maybe they're going back for the last time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a scary, scary thought. So if someone is a victim of physical violence, what do they do? How do they get help? They've made the decision, I can't do this anymore. What do they do?
First thing is cut the call the hotline.
Hmm.
And somebody in the hotline can give them some immediate crisis counseling, and they can refer them to different places. Let's say we get a call from the hotline that they have a client that needs some assistance. We take care of that immediately. We don't waste time. We do the best we can. We work with other agencies. We look for resources, and if necessary, we bring them in. One thing that many victims don't know is that there are ways that they can move from one county to another, and the state has a program where if the perpetrator tries to find out where they are, the database that they look into, they will find another address. So meaning that if a victim from, let's say, from our area, Greenville, wants to use the service and she wants to put a different location where she's really living at, okay, because she's afraid that the perpetrator has access to get her information, then the information that she can put in may be an address in Nashville, and maybe an address in another county, and that way it keeps her safe, and it gives her some relief too, because it must be terrible to be looking after your shoulder, wondering if that perpetrator is going to be around you anywhere at any time.
They're going to find you. Yeah. Now, I would say if someone is in an emergent situation, of course, you're going to dial 911. Get help.
Absolutely.
Number one priority is getting out
Safe.
and being safe.
Yep.
Second step, if you're in a situation where it's non-emergent, again, like Dan said, you're going to call the hotline. And that number is scrolling periodically at the bottom of the screen, and it will also be in the description section on both YouTube and Facebook. So that number and the suicide prevention hotline. Finally, I think, and I'm going to say, Lily and Daniel with the Safe Harbor Home are very, very open to answering questions and providing linkage to resources, even if you're not in the 8 counties that are necessarily served by a Safe Harbor Home.
Yeah.
So that number to reach out to, of course, that scrolls also, is 423-218-0774. And you can also reach them by email on their website at info@asafeharborhome.org. Don't forget, also check out their website, asafeharborhome.org, to find out about services and how you can help. So, all right, y'all. Lily, you want to come back up? Because I do want closing thoughts, and I would love Lily to join us for this tonight. So, Daniel, you got closing thought?
Well, it was good to be here tonight, and we'll see you back next week.
Yep.
You have a great week, and something shows up and you need some assistance regarding domestic violence, feel free to give us a call. 423-218-0774.
Also, you can, the list of the county will be scrolling at the bottom of the page as well. So, Heather, let's go ahead and hear your final thoughts from you.
I just want to say thanks for joining us. Thanks, Amy, for commenting and joining in the discussion with us. And I look forward to talking to you all next week.
Yes.
Lily, any closing thoughts? Oh, unmute, Lily.
Sorry. Thank you, everyone, for giving us an opportunity to enter to your home and for being part of our conversation tonight. Please call us 423-218-0774. We're here to help.
Thank you to Amy.
Yep,
Yeah,
thank you, Zane.
Thank you, Amy.
providing those questions and that feedback. My closing thoughts are simply this: there's help out there. You do not have to be in a relationship that hurts.
Yeah.
Love's not supposed to hurt. I know that might be corny and cliche, but it's really true, and it's really not supposed to. Next Thursday night, I think we're going to have a major trigger warning, because I think our next topic should be sexual violence, sexual abuse. And this will be very hard for some, very triggering. You can always reach out to any of us if you need someone to talk to. Plus, we do share those hotlines. I think that is it. That's all I had. I had a good time tonight. I think we got a lot of information out there. So
Yep.
I am
Thank
going to say
you.
Right.
we'll see you next Thursday night at 7:00.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.